Okie dokie, welcome everyone to another episode of the Craft Needle Addict podcast. I know it has been a very long time since I've made an episode, but I'm going to give this another try. If you're new here, welcome, and if you are returning, thank you so much for bearing with me in my long absence. The main aim of this podcast is for me to make friends in the crafty world and to help other people make friends in the crafty world. So I do encourage you to make use of the comment section below and reach out to me and each other and start conversations. I would love to hear from you. And just on a side note, I am aiming to release a video once a month. I know a lot of podcasts tend to release once a week, but I feel like once a month will be better suited to my output. I'll also introduce myself quickly since it's been so long. Some of you might be new here and wondering who I am. So I'm Ellie, and I was born in South Africa and I grew up in South Africa until a few years ago I moved to Scotland with my husband, and this is where we now live with our cat called Jack. I've been knitting since I was 5, and I've been crocheting since university, so I've been doing this for quite a while. I'm also an artist, and I paint landscapes and nature paintings. And you can find me on Instagram as Elliementalist, and I also have a blog which I will link down below in the description box. So I'm going to start this video with some admin or explaining some things since I've not made a podcast in so long. This style of podcast is kind of a combination. I'm not going to be videoing myself, so it's more like a traditional audio podcast. And my hope for this is that you will easily be able to listen to it while you are doing something else like knitting or housework or painting or whatever it is you like to do. However, I will be adding photos, so if you want to see what I'm talking about, you can. The reason I decided to do it this way is that this is what I would most want out of a podcast. I love having something playing while I'm crafting or doing housework, as it kind of keeps me company, but I don't want to have to keep rewinding because I missed seeing something awesome that was only on the screen for like 2 seconds. On the other hand, with pure audio podcasts, I often feel like I'm missing out because I would really like to see what they're talking about. And I'm having to just sort of imagine it. So I'm going to try and do a combination style, and I hope that you enjoy it. At the end of the video, be sure to leave me a comment and let me know how you found it, and whether this works for you. Right, that's enough of the admin. Let's get into the good stuff. So I'm going to be starting off with yarn. As it's been so long and I've done so many things since I last made a video, I'm just going to be starting with works in progress this time. In future I will include finished objects as well, but for now we'll just start with what I'm currently working on. For knitting, I'm currently working on a pair of socks for my husband. They are Rose City roller socks. The Rose City rollers are a pattern for sort of short rolled cuff instead of the more traditional ribbed cuff. They're being knit on 2.5mm and 80cm circular needles. For the contrast and toe, so I'm doing a contrast heel and toe, I'm using King Cole Zigzag in the color Ocean. And this is a sort of combination of deep blues and greens and self-striping. For the main body of the sock, I'm using Woolcraft Superwash in the color 46. It doesn't have a name, it's just the number 46. And this is a whole combination of burgundy and black and green. It's really interesting, sort of mottled when it knits up. We actually purchased the Woolcraft sock yarn when we went on holiday to an area of Scotland called Murray, and we went to a yarn shop in a little town called Nairn. Husband only has one pair of short summer socks and has been asking for ages that I make him some more. So these are a little late as we're basically heading into autumn this year, but I trust summer will come again next year and he can still use them. Next, I have another pair of socks. These are for me this time. These are being knit entirely from my scrap stash. So whenever I finish a pair of socks, usually there's a bit left over, especially if I've done contrast heel and toe. And so I keep that either for doing other contrast heels and toes, so I'll buy a new yarn for the body of the sock and I use the scraps for the contrast. In this case, I'm using entirely scraps. So they're also being knit on 2.5mm needles with the 80cm circular. For the contrasting cuff, heel and toe, I'm using West Yorkshire Spinners Signature 4-ply in the colour Delphinium, and the number is 805. This is a self-striping yarn in kind of light purple and white. For the body of the sock, I'm using a South African yarn called Elle in the colour Bermuda, and the number is 50. This is a mottled green and yellow colour, so it's self-striping and it kind of changes between like a mottled green and a mottled yellow. I originally used the West Yorkshire Spinners yarn to knit a pair of socks for my sister-in-law, so I will always think of those socks that I knit for her when I look at these socks that I've knit for myself. That's the thing I like about using scraps, is I always remember the project I used for the yarn for originally. Lastly, in my knitting section, I have a baby jumper that I'm knitting for a friend who's going to have a baby soon. The pattern is called Good Old Raglan. It's a free pattern on Ravelry. If you are able to use Ravelry, it's free there. And I'm knitting it in the 0 to 3 month size. There's a whole lot of different sizes, but I'm knitting the 0 to 3 months. I'm knitting it with the suggested 4mm needles, as I got gauge with that. And the yarn I'm using is Sirdar Snuggly Crofter DK. So this is an acrylic yarn which I particularly like for baby knits because I have never had children, but I presume that when you have a baby you don't have time for hand washing things. So I like a yarn that can go in the washing machine if I'm doing baby knits. This is double knitting yarn that is dyed in such a way that when you knit it up it kind of looks like Farrell knitting. Obviously your tension or the size of the piece will adjust exactly how it looks, but I think it looks quite pretty when you knit it up. And obviously you don't actually have to change the colors yourself because it's self-striping, so I think it's lovely. The colorway that we chose is 205 Barnaby, and it's kind of like a little bit of like a kind of bright blue or like tealy blue, and then lots of greens and white and grey. So I think it's very pretty when it knits up, so hopefully that'll be finished soon. Then my next section is crochet. I basically have one humongous project in this crochet section, and that is a blanket for my sister. The pattern I'm using is basically loosely based off of the Addict 24 ripple blanket pattern. Like, I'm not following like the sizing, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do for the border, but the general pattern of how you create the ripple or wave is I'm using the Addict 24 instructions, and I can link that pattern in the description box below. I'm using Stylecraft DK yarn. This is also an acrylic yarn, which my sister's actually allergic to wool, so I always have to use acrylic for her. And my sister chose the colors. And also, just to know, I am using a 4mm hook. So there are 4 colors, and I'm doing them like in a repeating color order. So we start off with silver, and the number is 1203. The next is a sort of lighter, so silver is like the lightest grey, and then there's a slightly darker grey which is called grey 1099, and then we go into the third grey, which is a much darker, deeper grey, and that is called graphite 1063. And then I finish off the striping repeat with Empire 829, which is kind of quite a bright blue. So we're going like graduating silver light grey to dark grey, and then the blue stripe, and then I'm just repeating these as I go. So I work each stripe as the full 100 grams of the ball, and then I change to the next color. So it does actually change, not always in the same place on the row. So when I've crocheted that 100 grams, the end of the ball is not always in the same place, but my sister said she doesn't mind. You can't really notice it, like you can't really notice where it changed, I don't think, and so we just kind of went with that. Otherwise I would land up like using a lot more time and wasting a lot of yarn trying to make it end at the end of the row. So that's how we're doing the stripes. And this is, I believe, the largest blanket that I've attempted to make, because it's for a king size bed, it's a UK king size, which I believe is a South African queen size bed. And to make things harder for myself, I'm also using a true DK weight yarn, which is thinner than the other blankets I've made in the past. I've made, I think, 3 blankets in the past, and I made them all in South Africa. So I used a South African yarn called Charity Knit DK, which is actually closer to an Aran weight. Now, not all South African double knits are equivalent to Aran weight. Actually, most South African double knits are true double knits, but for some reason the specific one, the charity knit, is actually an Aran weight. So I'm now crocheting a bigger blanket with a finer yarn. So needless to say, this is taking me much longer than I'd anticipated, but thankfully my sister is very patient. So I'm just working on it as fast as I can. Doing this pattern also takes more concentration for me, as I have to remember to work the 4 stitches, increase 2, work 4 stitches and decrease 2. Whereas if I was working in kind of straight stripes or maybe a granny treble, you can do like the kind of granny treble that you do for a granny square, you can do it in straight stripes as well. And those go much faster for me, as I don't really need to count or concentrate, so I can easily do it while doing something else and it kind of zooms along, whereas now I actually have to pay attention. And as a side note, my cat Jack absolutely loves this blanket. I don't know what it is. Like, my previous cats have always liked kind of softer, more like fleecy blankets. He loves crochet blankets, and every time I pull out this blanket to work on it, he comes running to come sit on it, which is also kind of annoying because then I can't really turn the work when he's sitting on it. But anyway, a good thing my sister's not allergic to cats. I mean, I will be washing the blanket, but anyway. Yes, he loves it, and I will add some photos at the end of this video so that you can see him in all of his glory loving this blanket if you want to. So hopefully I'll have this blanket finished by Christmas, and then I can give it to her when I see her. So now I'm going to do a painting section. I didn't previously have a painting section in my podcast, but I thought it would be fun to try and add it and see how it goes. I currently have a Christmas market coming up in November that I will be selling my art at, so I've just been working on building up some stock for that I'll have some things to sell. I'll also get some prints made and that sort of thing. But this week I just finished a painting of Edinburgh Castle. It was quite a challenge for me to try and paint a man-made structure in my loose style, because obviously man-made, like a castle, is like quite a lot of straight edges and windows and things, so it's very difficult how to interpret that into a more loose, suggestive style, but still having it so that it represents what it is. But I think it was good for me to push myself to do this. It was a challenge, but it was a good thing because I feel like that's how I grow as an artist. I also recently decorated a book for my knitting or crochet pattern designs. If you didn't know, since last time I made one of these videos, I've started designing and selling crochet and knitting patterns. So the problem for me was that I was sketching my ideas in my regular art sketchbook, but then I'd lose them, because I don't always make the pattern as soon as I've sketched the idea down. Sometimes I go back to the idea months later, but art-wise, I might have already moved on to a new sketchbook, so then I've got to go through all my old sketchbooks and try and find like the 2 or 3 pages that I sketched this idea down. So I thought it would be a much better idea to purchase like a nice sketchbook just to have as a dedicated pattern design sketchbook. And the one I purchased happened to have like a hard MDF, like a compressed wood cover. So I decided to decorate it, and I decoupaged it with some pretty serviettes that we're currently using in the dining room. I decoupaged that onto the cover, and then I painted the edge with some gold colored acrylic paint. And then obviously finally I varnished it to make sure it's protected and that it will last long. Other than that, I don't really currently have a painting that I'm working on, as I'm now in the process of packing up a lot of my studio craft room so that we can renovate it. We need to do some painting and some fixing up of things, and I have probably too much stuff that's in my studio, so we need to pack up some stuff and move it so that we can actually renovate it. So I'm trying to kind of cut back on how much mess I'm making. And that kind of leads me nicely to the next section, which is my future plans. So for knitting, I will always be casting on more socks as soon as I finish the current ones. I tend to have a pair of socks for myself and a pair of socks for my husband on the go, unless I'm knitting for a friend or some other family member. I always have those 2 pairs of socks going, and so as soon as I'm finished one of those pairs, I will cast on another, because I just love knitting socks. Socks for me are like my go-to car knitting project, or if we're going to be seeing people or whatever, because socks for me, I can knit without thinking. I can totally have a full intense conversation and knit socks at the same time, so I always love to have a pair of socks on the go. Then I also have some Christmas presents that I want to start knitting, but I can't really talk about them in case the recipients of the gifts will watch this video and obviously spoil the surprise. I also have some more baby items I want to knit for my friend who's having the baby, but obviously I'm going to finish that jumper that I'm knitting first, and then I'll just do one at a time really. For crochet, I do actually have a new pattern design that I want to work on. I've sketched it all out in my new design sketchbook, so I won't forget what it is, but I will not be working on that until I finish my sister's blanket. I really am feeling, even though she's been super chilled about it, I'm feeling a lot of pressure that I'm putting on myself. Like, I just want to have it finished. I started it, I think, before May, definitely before May. I think it was like maybe even February maybe that I started the blanket. So I want to have it finished now. I'm just putting pressure on myself. So I'm going to be doing that before I start any design projects. Other than that, I also have an interesting idea for a mixed media art project that will involve crochet and painting on a canvas. So I'm quite excited about that, but like I said, I need to wait until I'm free to make a mess in my studio again. I've also sketched this out in my art sketchbook so that I won't forget about it. I will be able to do it, but I just need to put that on hold for a little bit. And that's kind of it. We've come to the end of my podcast. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, well done. As I said before, I really encourage you to get in touch with me via the comment section. I'd love to hear from you. If you did enjoy this video, please leave a like on the video. It's a great way for you to let me know that you enjoyed the video. If you don't feel like commenting, if you're shy or you just don't have anything to say, then if you just give me a little thumbs up, then I know that you enjoyed it and I can continue to make more videos for those who do like them. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time, and for now I'll leave you with some photos of Jack enjoying the crochet blanket. Bye bye!